do what I've always done with illness, which is everything's fine. Suppress, suppress, suppress. I'm on my own, I'm now single. I just felt incredibly vulnerable.
How have you been with yourself whilst you've been in a much more delicate place over the last week or so?
Doing a bit more than I should because it's a distraction from dealing with everything that's going on.
You don't get out of ME chronic fatigue with the same strategy that put you in it.
I know it, I believe it, I've been there, got to a better place, but it just always seems to go out the window when I have a bad couple of days.
That's okay. The main thing is that you then get yourself back on track and you don't give yourself a hard time for that. Welcome to this week's episode of In Therapy with me, Alex Howard. And for this week's episode, we're catching up with Lauren. Lauren's reached the point in her inner journey where we're really starting to explore her relationship with her feelings and emotions. Particularly in this week's episode, we're looking at the different ways that she tends to avoid, distract, state change, get away from what she's actually feeling. All of the participants in therapy as part of their ongoing work are going through the Reset program. This is my 12-week online coaching program, and it's a way of them going really much deeper into the work that I'm doing in the one-on-one sessions. So you hear us referencing that a little bit in this session, but I think this is important for anyone who's learning to calm their nervous system, perhaps has had trauma in their life or has learned to disconnect from their feelings, to really start to get awareness of some of those patterns. So here's Lauren.
Hello, I haven't done one of these video diaries for a very long time. I've just had a lot on my plate and I've been back to work 4 full days a week now, which has really knocked me. It's been really great. I'm loving being productive, but it means the rest of the time I'm often completely flat out and crashing quite badly. To be honest, the self-isolation and all this crazy virus stuff that's going on has actually been kind of weirdly one of the best things that's happened for me, because it's taken a lot of the pressure off. I don't have the pressure to see my family, although I love seeing my family, but I would then kind of pay a price somewhere else in my day or my week. You know, a lot of the time I'm cancelling quite last minute because I always think, well, I'm not going to commit until I know how I feel, and then I generally just never feel well enough to go to these things. And also just little things like I start to get my energy back and I kind of want to live my life. I'm like, oh, I want to drive somewhere, I want to go somewhere, I want to do something, which I do, and invariably I crash again. So the self-isolation has meant that I've actually got no excuses to kind of spend time with myself and stick to my routines. My lodger is an extremely vulnerable. I'm in the kind of very vulnerable, but not overly vulnerable. So I try to do our shopping and everything, but we have to be really careful. So I've had to get rid of the dog walker and I've had to get rid of the cleaner, and it's been that's what's really taken its toll on me these last few weeks, is trying to keep on top of the house. I've got hay fever as well, which just adds to everything else going on. So I'm finding that quite challenging. I've also been trying to take the dogs out every day to make sure they get exercise. I was doing quite well and then I crashed. And then I had to have my ex come help me one day to look after them. And I've had a couple of volunteers who've been helping me. But obviously it's every time you have someone, you know, touch the dogs or take the dogs and the leads and stuff, you know, you just don't know if they're healthy or not, and you don't know if there's any chance you're going to transmit anything. But you know, I've had to take the help. You know, there's just I've got 2 very boisterous dogs, and sometimes I have to take help, and I hate asking for help. So that's a pretty big thing for me. I've managed to walk them 2 days in a row now. Hopefully again today. I'm feeling a bit better. My biggest achievement in life is walking my dogs. I mean, how did my biggest achievement in life go from having a 6-pack and traveling around the world and having a great career go to walking my dogs?
How are you doing?
Yeah, ups and downs.
Okay.
Same old.
Yeah.
I've got the pups in the room.
That's fine.
fast asleep, but might have to kick them out. Yeah, ups and downs. Actually,
Okay.
I'm a bit down, but I have recently been on a bit of up. So
Okay. Well, before we come to that, also I'm just wondering how it's been for you having had the first 3 episodes released. I was just
yeah,
curious
really
how
good.
that's been.
I didn't realise the other 2 had been released actually. So I was searching for the first one to send to my mum, and then I was like, oh, there's 3. And actually, like I enjoyed watching them again actually, because it really made me think. Because like I said before, you're so focused on the moments that almost like in one ear and out, and then when like at the end of the day, I'm going, what did we discuss again? Okay. And I remember bits and pieces, but watch the things again at like refresher stuff. And I sent them to my mum, and she's my stepmom, but she's my mum, and she phoned me in tears actually, just saying, I'm going to get emotional now as well, but she says, don't, one of the things she said, like, please don't ever call yourself a fuck up again. You're not a fuck up. And she was like, I really feel responsible because you were different, and we didn't understand that you were different, and we kept trying to make you like we were. And in the end, it just made you unhappy. And so she cried and I cried, and she just said, like, wanted me to know how proud of me they are and where I am in my life, given that I had a rocky start and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm always found it very hard to talk emotions to family without it coming across like I'm trying to blame them,
Right.
or I'm angry at them, or I'm resentful at them. So I kind of just like learned to just try, but like, because but when I was younger, it always used to come out as anger, it always used to turn into a big argument. And so yeah, so I guess it was a way of her seeing stuff. I honestly, I sent it to her more because I thought she'd be proud of me kind of identifying my materialistic side. And actually, she saw a whole different side of it that I didn't expect her to see, which I never meant it to be like that, anyway.
Yeah.
It really bonded me and my mum. So, that's a really good thing that came away from it. And we just couldn't give each other a hug. We're like, I just want to hug you right now. But obviously, with social distancing, all we could do is like wave from afar occasionally.
I'm really pleased to hear that had that impact. And it's interesting because certainly my experience has been the more that one shows their vulnerable self to the people that they love and love them, actually the deeper relationships go. And often our fear is that if we show our vulnerabilities that we're going to be rejected, or people are going to be kind of not going to hear it the way we want to. So yeah, I'm really pleased that it had that impact. I think that's really great. So yeah, talk me through what's been happening. It's about a month since we last spoke. So yeah, just sort of give me the sort of the ups, the downs, and the bits in between.
I would say it's kind of going up, but like this,
Yeah.
like very squiggly. But it's so easy to forget progress when you still feel like you're feeling a bit rubbish. But at the end of the day, I do walk my dogs, and yes, that is one of the reasons that's keeping me from recovering better, is because I'm being more physically active than I probably should be. But I can walk my dogs, and I managed to do about 8 days in a row this month, and then I had to take a few days off and I had to get volunteers in, but I was able to do it. And this weekend I also had some volunteers come help, but I forget that 3 months ago that still would have been a completely just totally so unachievable.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, and it's sort of up and down all over the place. And I think part of what will be good to talk about today is how do we stop so much of an up and down? Like, how do we create a bit more steadiness to it? How do we protect the progress that's happening whilst also hoping to kind of at least make sure we maintain the momentum that's there? When you kind of have the ups and downs, what do you feel is influencing and triggering that?
Well, I did your module 6 the other day, and I do feel that it's a lot to do with my own head and my own emotions and my own distractions. So when I'm feeling a bit better or a bit anxious, I need to keep my mind occupied. So I pick up my phone 500 million times a day, and I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram, and I'm blah, blah, blah. And I'm finding stuff to obsess about and keep busy, because it's like the alternative is having to sit there and rest and feel a bit sorry for myself and sad and the loss of what I could be doing. So which is my own worst enemy, because I know the phone makes me worse, and yet I still will sit there with the phone. And I noticed that on my lower usage phone days that I track, I have an app now, I feel better than my high usage phone days, but I still do.
Yeah, so I think that's probably an important piece of the jigsaw. And I think it's interesting that you watched module 6 on emotional styles, because it certainly would make sense for me that you have a strong pattern of avoid and distract. So if you're feeling something that feels uncomfortable, or feeling something that you don't want to be feeling, that you just put your attention elsewhere. And if we look back at your sort of historical kind of life pattern, the kind of constant being busy and going to different places and having different interests and doing different things is partly a strategy of just not feeling your feelings and emotions.
Yeah. So I've suffered from depression on and off since I was about 10 years old, but I've always been the last person to realize it or admit it. So I've been on and off antidepressants and stuff. But one of the things I've always done when my depression gets higher, and even my mum has noticed this and I don't notice it, is I get faster and faster, and more and quicker and quicker. And it's like, I mean, I can't imagine 3 years ago if I'd ever would have just sat down and relaxed, because I was like, oh God, then you'd have to face up to an emotion or think about, life. And I was always like, okay, if as long as I'm busy, I can't feel, the feelings of depression can't think in. I used to have like a Sunday where I had no plans. I'd pace the house and feel like the most unloved person in the world because I had no one to spend Sunday with and nothing to do. Like now I love Sundays on my own, but it was that distraction, and then also the other thing that resonated was the substances and stuff. Like, the more tired I was getting, the more I was drinking, the more I was taking recreational drugs, which I'd stopped taking when I was younger, because I was like, I don't want to slow down. I want to keep going. God, I feel so tired. Okay, let me have, like, every activity I did, I was like, where's there a glass of something? I need a drink.
Yeah.
And if somebody wanted to go for coffee, I was like, I've not got the energy for this.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a sort of constant kind of attempt to change how you feel, right? So either by avoidance and distraction and being busy, or using drugs or alcohol or exercise or kind of excitement and adventures, chocolates, like whatever it may be, to change the feelings that are there. And you see, there's different types of depression. And what I'm sort of curious to understand more is that when you say when you'd have periods of depression, that you would kind of, the more you'd feel it, the faster you'd go as a way of trying to get away from it. Mm-hmm. What were those feelings of depression? Because what I'm curious about is you, for a number of years, lived life in such a way that you were rejecting yourself, ignoring yourself, focused on this sort of idealized self that we talked about previously, that I wonder if that depression was depression, or was actually your heart's way of saying to you that the way you were living was very painful, and actually was a genuinely healthy communication that hurt at the time, but it was just, you were trying everything you could to not feel it. And I'm not saying you should just kind of slid into depression and become lost in it, but trying to really understand why you were feeling that way. So I'm kind of curious as to what those feelings actually were, and what perhaps some of the circumstances of when that happened.
I think the first time when I was younger, when I was really young, it was just because I'd moved overseas to a mother that I didn't really know. I was 10 years old in another country, so another school, and I was just lost. Yeah. So I think, that was really horrible, because I wasn't allowed to be depressed, I was always getting told of, like, oh, you moping face. And, I got banned from reading because apparently I was reading too much, because I was escaping and I had to live my life and I had to make friends. And there was a lot of pressure at that time to being this normal kid. But I don't think you understand how hard it is at 10 years old to move country to a parent that you hardly know. Mm-hmm. So that was my first kind of, I suppose, experience of depression. And, you learn how to fake it. And then I kind of had just a relapse, and it was 16 years old again. I had family problems. I was living with a friend's family and stuff, and that was all like, so I think those were all kind of, that's where I learned what, like, that depression was something I had to hide.
Yeah, it's what you're describing to me doesn't sound necessarily like depression. What you're describing to me sounds like a child's human response to feeling emotional neglect, to feeling unheld emotionally, unseen, vulnerable, delicate, scared, and not knowing what to do with those feelings. That sounds like a really important set of feelings that just weren't understood and weren't held. And I understand why you had to develop coping strategies to deal with that. But that doesn't sound the same to me as what I would consider sort of classical depression, which is that there's a biochemical imbalance and for no valid reason, someone's just feeling completely low and flat in mood.
And it's funny, I agree with that because I've always had a problem with antidepressants. And let me tell you, every doctor under the sun has tried to put me on antidepressants. But I guess so. And then when I was 16, I found ecstasy, and the love drug. And that basically just like got me through the next like 5 or 6 years of my life, really, because that was like, suddenly this was love. And this is what I thought, and I made some amazing friends, and it was just like I finally felt like I belonged somewhere, but it wasn't very obviously very real. It was very chemical, but I'd say that actually in a way was a crutch for me through some really difficult times. And then depression was kind of different after that. It was very aligned with burning out, eating disorders, so that was if I was in a dark place and self-harming and stuff like that. I think it was a lot of it was loneliness and not feeling good enough and just being very, very lost.
Yeah.
So of course I felt sad. I used to walk down the street, and this is probably in my like late 20s. So, and I used to look at all these people sitting in restaurants having dinner, or people doing things, God, like, fuck you. Why do you get to enjoy these things and be happy and laugh and stuff? I can't do that. I don't feel that. Like I just, and when I was getting chronic fatigue, all the doctors were like, you're just depressed. I was like, I know the difference between depression and chronic fatigue. Depression is not wanting to do anything or see anyone, whereas chronic fatigue was not being able to, but wanting to, I fought really hard because of my like history of depression to get for my chronic fatigue to be taken as something other than depression.
Where do you feel you are at sort of this point in your ability to be with your feelings? And when you are with your feelings, what's that like?
So in some ways, I think I've come a long way, but in other ways, when I watched that module 6 about it, I was like, oh my God, I do all those things all the time. So I think the analysis thing is like a good thing and a bad thing, because yes, it makes me more aware, but also I do the analysis maybe too extreme. So I don't have that much balance when it comes to like, I feel emotion, understanding it, processing it. I kind of get that emotion and analyze it for like weeks. And then, I don't know. I worry. I'm starting to wean off antidepressants, and I'm worried that a lot of my being kind of hyper emotional stuff is going to come back.
Part of what we need to be doing is to be developing a different way of being with yourself emotionally. And part of that is as simple and as complex as allowing yourself to feel how you feel. And it sounds enormously oversimplistic that you might feel frustrated or you might feel upset about something, and you just let yourself have that feeling. And very often with feelings, when you feel feelings, we move through them and then something else can happen. But the more we try and escape feelings, the more we get caught in a sort of dance where the feeling's there and then we're trying to escape it and then it's still there, and we just get caught in this endless sort of battle with it. So yeah, as you've been making progress in the way that you have with pacing, with listening to your body, with calming your system, the sort of almost inevitable next piece is that then starting to feel some of these underlying feelings and emotions that you've been trying to escape, to get away from, to distract yourself away from. And you say you've gone through module 6. Have you started on module 7? Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely the next piece for you, which is starting to do the homework at the end of module 6, which is the situation, feeling, response piece. Yeah. So how was that? What was that? I suppose you've been feeding that back anyway in terms of what you were saying around the different strategies.
Yeah, I did. There was quite an eye-opener, actually. I'm kind of taking back some of what I said earlier, because I think I have improved because of how I've been processing my relationship and allowing myself to feel the pain and everything, and not like normally, you know, the first thing you do when you feel pain is to distract yourself and try get on dating apps and stuff like that. And I've not been like that. I've been very much kind of like focusing on healing and dealing with that. So I guess in a way I have improved, and also in a funny way, I have much smaller things in my box of tools. Before I had alcohol and parties and gym and whatever. Now I've really only got chocolate. Pretty much all I have.
Chocolate, that sounds terrible.
So like, and whenever I think, oh, I stop eating chocolate, I think, God, I've given up everything. You want me? I'm trying to give up chocolate at the moment as well, but I'm like, because I've gained a lot of weight, but I'm like, it's the last thing I've got left, damn it. But it is, I do use it. That and my phone are still being used in the same way I would have used exercise, whatever. So it's smaller because that's all I have. Yeah. But I can imagine if I had my health, it would have been all the old things I used to do. Like I would have just been fanatical at the gym, dieting, jumped on an airplane somewhere just for the sheer hell of it. Like that's how I would have dealt with stuff in the past. I physically can't. So it limits.
Physically can't, and the whole world's in lockdown anyway.
Yeah. But and I guess it makes me realize, like, have I? Yes, I think I've improved, but I've also just it's like a product of my environment a lot as well. So doing the homework highlighted loads of things. I won't read from it, but I'll just kind of remind myself. But it was like certain things, you know, if my partner didn't think or bother to buy some groceries and make dinner or feed the dogs or etc., I'd get so angry and frustrated and upset. And I'd analyze for ages, like, why is he doing this? Like, what have I done? Like, why can't he work this out? Like, how could I do things differently? You know, and then I'd be really blaming him. And actually, all I probably had to do in the entire relationship is just ask. You know, like, but I would turn it into this big maelstrom of emotions and feelings that would last for like 6 hours until we'd have an argument about it, and it would be like something, and then it would be fine. And it'd be like, well, why didn't you just ask? Oh, you know, like, but that's how I would deal with these emotions, is turn into all this kind of something else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the somatic, the physical muscular pain, I think that's my number one. Anything that I find that makes me uncomfortable just immediately gets my nervous system up. So, you know, getting woke up early in the morning to another phone call, or music or whatever, I'm like, I just like gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and it's part of it is when we're not in touch with how we feel emotionally, that our nervous system is also much more reactive to things, because in a sense it doesn't feel safe because we're rejecting and we're not listening to how we feel. The more we're in touch emotionally, one of the impacts of that is it's like having a child which doesn't, you know, a bit like what you were describing, you know, your way of responding to not having the emotional support and holding and being seen that you needed was to speed up and to get distracted. And the more emotionally held and seen and supported we are, the more the whole system then calms and settles. And in a sense, as children, we're dependent upon others to do that for us because we don't have that capacity. And then as adults, we just do what was done to us. So if we were emotionally not seen and not held, we weren't taught how to do it. We don't do it for ourselves. Part of what you're learning now is how to give yourself what you needed as a child that you didn't get, and what you still need as an adult that you're only starting to get as you start to give it to yourself. And that's where, as you start to feel your feelings, just letting yourself feel your feelings, like making more space for and listening to and tuning into, and allowing and validating what's there. And that in of itself allows everything then to calm and to settle.
Still, the one big one that I struggle with is this worrying and control about the future. So whether it's like selling my house and sorting out my finances, or my fertility issues and having a baby, blah, 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 that is those are the main triggers, I think, some of the main triggers, not main triggers, but some of the main triggers that cause me to distract myself a lot, because I'm like, got to be doing something. Okay, let me build another spreadsheet, because building a spreadsheet makes me feel like I'm back in control. Yeah. Okay, what can I do now? Okay, let me go back onto Rightmove. I'm sure there's a property I haven't seen. Maybe I need to, like, and I constantly feel like that's when my phone comes into play so much, because it's like, I need to be doing something. Like, things aren't happening. I know nothing's moving, and therefore, like, I'm feeling out of control. Yeah. And obviously this COVID thing's not helping, because at first it was really quite a relief, because I was like, there's nothing I can do about it. Whew. It was like a week of like, this is quite nice actually. But then as it's gone on and on, my anxiety's picked up again, because I'm like, I've got to sort this. How am I going to sort that out? And my mind just gets into this maelstrom. Yeah, and that's definitely the avoidance and distraction, but the over-analyzing and the somatic, all three of those kind of come into play.
And also, you're trying to get a feeling of safety by action. It's like, as long as it's a very Enya type 3-ish pattern, like, if I do enough, then I'll be safe, in a sense. And the problem is, the more that you do, actually, the more stress you're causing your system, the more fatigued you get, the more powerless you feel, the more anxious you feel, the more you feel you need to be doing stuff. And so learning just to make space for and listen to and allow your feelings calms that whole cycle. And as you calm that whole cycle, you start to have more energy. You start to feel better. Then you have less of a drive for that cycle in the first place.
It's funny, because I'm a doer. That's like, in my career, in my job, that's what's kind of got me to where I am, is that if things need to get done, give them to Lauren, she'll do them. She'll get it done, And that's kind of how I've always focused everything. Like, if I'm doing, I'm moving, and I'm getting somewhere, and then I'm in control, and then I'm safe.
Yeah, that makes sense. The problem is that is the very cycle that we now need to break. And learning to not do is part of what you've already been doing. We're sort of continuing that. But I suppose what we're now doing is, it's not just doing less activity and calming that achiever pushing pattern. It's also then making space for and tuning into, like, what are you actually feeling? Like, what are the emotions that are underlying this? And I think that's where, if you can start to focus on module 7, and that will give you more context around this. And then part of your sort of homework then is just to start to make more space for your feelings. And that might be a bit bumpy for a while, and that's okay. Like, when there's a history like what you're describing, one can feel afraid of emotion. Like, well, if I feel I'm going to get sucked into a bottomless pit of depression, I'm never going to get out of it, so I need to be busy to avoid it. And what I think is really important for you to realize is, your feelings are not something to be afraid of. Your feelings, actually, if they'd been really listened to and honored and understood, you wouldn't have needed to keep pushing in all of these ways. That actually they're your path to health and balance, not your path to depression and falling apart.
Mm-hmm. I think people think I'm stronger than I am because I don't cry as much, or I'll go through a breakup and cry once, and but that doesn't mean I'm not hurting. Right. I just tend to suppress it, I think, and keep busy.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that the more that you honor and you feel your vulnerability in an ironic way, actually the stronger one becomes, because you're not constantly making yourself vulnerable by running and running and running to get away from it.
I think I just need to focus a little bit more on getting back into my routine, to my meditations and stuff, and on the nervous system, because I feel that has more effect than any of the supplements at the moment, or the medication. And I want to wean off the medication. So if I'm going to wean off the medication, and it's a very slow process, then I need to really ramp up my natural defenses, because I'm not really making true progress if I'm still using medication to cope.
Yeah, I mean, medication has its place, as you know, to stabilize things. And ultimately, you want to be in a place where you're not dependent upon that, unless there's a medical reason why you need to be. And I think it's going slowly. I think meditation is critical for where you are right now, both from what you're saying, but also it just is for the chapter you're at. Mm-hmm. You can almost predict how well things progress at this point by how disciplined someone is in following those practices in terms of both the meditation and the stop process, calming your system, but also stopping the patterns that then get it activated again. And yeah, I think you just need to keep being patient, being gentle with yourself, and remembering the progress that's already there, and realizing that you will continue to build upon that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lauren. Take care.
Stay safe in your family as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I think this relationship between us and our feelings is really at the core of so many of the challenges we experience. When we experience trauma, when we go through chronic health challenges, one of the things we tend to happen is we tend to disconnect even further from what we're feeling. But ultimately, you can't heal what you don't feel. We don't have to re-experience all of those experiences, but we do have to digest and metabolize what's being held in our body. If you've been touched by this week's episode, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your reflections in the comment section below this video. Please do also like the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit the notification bell. These things really help us. They tell YouTube this is content worth sharing. YouTube then shows it to more people. It also means you're more likely to see new episodes as we release them. You'll also have heard that Lauren and I were referencing the Reset program. You can find out more about that and sign up for a free 3-part video series at alexhoward.tv/reset. In next week's episode, we're going to be catching up with Sally. And Sally's at an exciting point of her healing journey where she's starting to do what we call bouncing the boundaries. She's starting to expand her capacity because healing has been happening. So I'm looking forward to talking with you then.
Me and my husband David have come out to Stowe. I'm feeling like I've got energy.
I haven't had any symptoms for ages.
It certainly sounds to me like there's a significant stage 3 transition that's sort of happening here.
That's exciting. Really exciting.
Being off work on furlough has been amazing for me. Unfortunately, that's changed. I'm being asked to work full-time hours. I am really quite scared that my symptoms are all going to come back and I'm going to be unwell again.